Travis Dawson never expected his short flight to LA to become a high-stakes battle. From the moment he stepped on board, ominous tension crackled through the cabin. He was one pitch away from revolutionizing tech with VistaFlow, yet suspicious glances and whispered warnings hinted at looming trouble. As uniformed officers closed in, his pulse thundered. Could this be the end of his dream? Comment below where you're watching from, hit like, share, and don't forget to subscribe. Travis Dawson tapped his foot nervously against the glossy airport floor in Houston, replaying his pitch in his mind. He was bound for Los Angeles to unveil VistaFlow, an app his fledgling startup had spent countless hours perfecting. For Travis, this trip wasn't just another business excursion, it was the culmination of years of ambition and hard work. If the presentation went well, it could reshape his entire future. Boarding the plane, Travis couldn't help but notice the stares as he made his way to his first-class seat. Dressed in a comfortable hoodie and jeans, he didn't quite match the sleek suit surrounding him, and an uneasy tension clung to the air. He settled into his seat, carefully stashing his laptop bag under the chair in front of him. Inside was everything: prototypes, design documents, and a meticulously crafted proposal for the conference. Moments after takeoff, a flight attendant named Dana Willows began her usual rounds through the cabin. At first, Travis paid little attention. He was busy rehearsing his presentation, whispering bullet points to himself and scrolling through slides on his tablet. But the subtle tension in Dana's voice caught his ear when she asked if he'd like anything to drink. Her gaze lingered on him just a beat too long, and her smile was hesitant. Travis felt the weight of it, a quiet signal that he was being watched more closely than the other passengers. While handing him a napkin, Dana asked to see his boarding pass again. Travis complied without hesitation, chalking it up to protocol. But when she requested his ID as well, he realized she was scrutinizing him in a way that felt personal. He kept calm, reminding himself that raising his voice wouldn't help. He slid his driver's license across the tray table. The moment stretched out uncomfortably as Dana examined it, then glanced at him, then returned to the license once more. An unsettling awareness of bias flickered in Travis's thoughts. He had experienced something like this before, people questioning why he was where he was, suspicious of his presence for reasons that had nothing to do with logic. The uneasy look in Dana's eyes confirmed his worst suspicions. She believed he didn't belong in first class, and she was searching for any justification to challenge him. Trying to focus on his work, Travis turned his attention back to his tablet. He could practically hear the countdown in his head. In just a few hours, he would be standing in front of industry giants, pitching VistaFlow to potential investors. Everything was on the line, and he wanted to be mentally prepared. Yet the strange, charged atmosphere aboard the plane was already distracting him. When Dana reappeared, this time conferring quietly with another attendant, Travis felt his pulse quicken. A knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. He told himself to remain calm, to handle the situation professionally. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. The subtle looks, the quiet conversation, the repeated ID check, it all hinted that trouble was brewing. He just didn't realize how quickly it would escalate. Travis Dawson tried to steady his heartbeat as Dana Willows vanished down the aisle, her face drawn with unmistakable concern. He forced himself to take a deep breath, reminding himself that he had done nothing wrong. Logic told him to stay calm, but an uneasy sense of foreboding crept through his veins. VistaFlow, the app that could catapult his tech startup to new heights, sat on his laptop like a silent witness to the tension brewing in first class. Just as Travis considered pulling out his notes to distract himself, 2 uniformed police officers boarded the plane. The chatter in the cabin grew hushed, passengers craning their necks to see what was happening. Heart pounding in his chest, Travis watched as the officers spoke briefly with Dana before zeroing in on him. Their footsteps echoed in the narrow aisle, and Travis felt the weight of every pair of eyes locked on his seat. Without preamble, one of the officers demanded to see his identification. Travis obliged, handing over his ID once again. He attempted to explain that he was a legitimate passenger on his way to Los Angeles for a critical business engagement. "Why is this happening?" he thought, frustration bubbling up. Dana's wary expression offered a clue, but he still couldn't believe it had escalated so quickly. The officer's tone was cold. "We received a report that you've been acting suspiciously," he said, glancing pointedly at Travis's casual clothes and the laptop bag at his feet. Another officer hovered behind him, posture rigid and hand close to a holstered weapon. Travis swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. He tried to speak calmly, explaining his purpose on the flight and the nature of VistaFlow, but his words seemed to land on deaf ears. A few rows back, other passengers whispered in hushed tones. Some looked confused, others seemed uncomfortable. One or two aimed their phone cameras discreetly, capturing the scene. Travis felt both embarrassment and dread churn in his stomach. His mind raced. Is this really happening because I look suspicious? When he tried to stand, the first officer stepped forward and ordered him to remain seated. At this point, Travis's anxiety boiled over into real fear. His attempts to clarify the situation were cut short by clipped questions and sharp instructions. He began to suspect that the officers were searching for any reason to brand him as a threat. Meanwhile, Dana stayed rooted a few feet away, her arms crossed tightly, offering no help or apology. Then, without warning, the officers grabbed Travis's arm. Chairs squeaked as the other passengers recoiled in alarm. He protested, voice shaking with both anger and panic, insisting he had done nothing illegal. But the officers overpowered him, hauling him into the aisle. The entire plane seemed to spin around him as they roughly pushed him forward. "Stop resisting," one officer barked, though Travis was simply trying to catch his balance. A swirl of emotions coursed through him, outrage, shock, and above all, humiliation. In that moment, the silent stares of the surrounding passengers felt like burning spotlights. Dana stayed silent, her eyes avoiding his as he was taken toward the exit. This only fueled his disbelief. He thought about his father's advice about staying composed under pressure and how important it was never to lose his temper in a situation like this. But logic was a weak armor when standing face to face with aggression and prejudice. They removed him from the aircraft in front of airport security personnel and stunned onlookers. On the jet bridge, the confrontation escalated. The officers wrestled him against a wall, pinning his arms back as he pleaded for someone to listen. By the time they let him go, his head was spinning, and his wrists throbbed where their grips had tightened. He barely had time to process the flurry of accusations, something about potential danger, threatening demeanor, resisting authority, before he found himself ushered into a holding area in the terminal. Over and over, Travis tried to explain that he was just an entrepreneur on a business trip, but each explanation sounded hollow to the officers. Eventually, they released him with a harsh warning, but the ordeal was far from over. As Travis made his way to baggage claim, a flurry of emotions battled inside him, frustration at the blatant profiling he had endured, relief that he was no longer handcuffed, and a grim determination that this could not be the end of his fight. He managed to collect his luggage, though his carefully pressed business clothes were now rumpled. Stepping outside into the warm California sun, Travis tried to steady himself. His car, a rental he'd arranged for the duration of the conference, was parked in a nearby structure. Adrenaline still coursed through him, making his hands tremble as he gripped the steering wheel. Yet no sooner had he started the engine than a violent shock rattled the vehicle. An explosion, sharp and sudden, shattered the rear window. Travis flinched, reflexively ducking his head. Fear clawed its way through his chest. Confusion reigned. Who would do this? He scrambled out of the car, glass crunching underfoot. Blinking through the haze of settling dust, he realized he wasn't alone. A figure lingered a short distance away, one of the same officers from the plane, lurking near the garage exit. The realization struck like lightning, this was no random misfortune. He was being targeted. Travis Dawson stood in the dimly lit parking garage, staring at the shattered glass cascading from his rental car. The acrid scent of burnt residue clung to the air, and his heart thumped so loudly in his ears that it almost drowned out every other sound. His ears rang from the explosion that had taken out the rear window. Across the concrete expanse, the figure of an officer loomed. Though the man quickly disappeared into the shadows, Travis had no doubts about who he was, one of the same cops who had forcibly removed him from the flight just hours ago. For several stunned seconds, Travis did nothing but breathe, trying to steady himself. The significance of what had happened weighed on him like lead. This wasn't just a random act of violence or a case of mistaken identity. It was deliberate intimidation, orchestrated to keep him silent or drive him away. Quickly, he ducked back into the driver's seat, brushing shards of glass onto the floor so he could sit without slicing into the upholstery. Adrenaline pulsed through him, but so did a deep resolve. If they thought this would scare him into submission, they were sorely mistaken. If anything, the brazen attack only confirmed how urgent it was for him to expose what had happened aboard that plane. He pulled out his phone, intending to call the authorities, only to stop short. The authorities? They were the very people he suspected of orchestrating this. He needed hard evidence, clear, indisputable proof that the corrupt officers were willing to go to violent extremes. With trembling hands, Travis snapped photographs of the damage, capturing every detail he could. He also recorded a quick video of the broken window, narrating what had occurred. His next step was to find a safe place and figure out his plan. Driving slowly out of the parking garage, he kept watchful eyes on the rearview mirror, half expecting another explosion or a car chasing him down. The warm Los Angeles sun beyond the concrete gloom felt jarring against his frayed nerves. At every red light, he scanned his surroundings, each passing face a potential threat. Finally, he reached the modest hotel where he had booked a room for the tech conference. After parking in a well-lit area near the hotel entrance, he carried his luggage inside, nerves still on edge. The clerk at the front desk eyed him curiously, especially when Travis asked if any suspicious individuals had inquired about him. Receiving only a polite, baffled shake of the head, he made his way to his room. There, he locked the door, drew the curtains, and placed a chair against the handle for extra security. The paranoia coursing through him felt surreal, but experience told him it was warranted. Sitting at the small desk, he tried to gather his thoughts. The flight, the arrest, the forced removal, the explosion, it was all connected, and it all hinged on the same small group of officers. Determination fueled him as he opened his laptop. Before dealing with anything else, he needed to make sure VistaFlow was backed up safely. The tech conference was still happening, and an enormous part of him wanted to go through with the presentation. This cannot be the end of my dream. He copied files onto secure cloud storage and even made an additional backup on an external hard drive. Once his startup's future was safely preserved, Travis shifted gears to focus on collecting evidence. He pulled up the pictures and videos stored on his phone, reviewing every angle of his run-in with the officers, the forced removal from the plane, and the aftermath in the parking garage. He had even managed to record some audio snippets during the flight, including one moment when the officer insisted he was endangering the cabin, though no rational explanation was given. As the hours passed, he pieced together a timeline, labeling each segment of footage with accurate details, location, time, context. His plan was to create a comprehensive portfolio of evidence that no official could dismiss as hearsay. To bolster his case, he began reaching out to fellow passengers he had seen filming with their phones. Through a combination of social media tags and direct messages, Travis hoped to compile testimonies from witnesses who had seen how the officers singled him out. He typed furiously, sending messages to strangers whose faces he vaguely recalled in the chaos. A few responded swiftly, sharing that they, too, had felt uneasy about the entire situation. One passenger sent him a brief video snippet capturing the moment officers slammed him against the airplane wall, while another claimed to have overheard Dana Willows's conversation with the police. By midnight, Travis's eyelids drooped from exhaustion, yet his determination wouldn't let him sleep. Memories of the explosion reverberated in his mind, constantly reminding him of the risk involved in exposing this corruption. But if he did nothing, he knew the injustice would persist, and the next person in his position might not get a chance to defend themselves. In the early morning hours, he finally allowed himself a few hours of restless sleep. When he woke, sunlight spilled through the edges of the thick curtains. His phone buzzed with notifications, replies from more witnesses, including one who had recorded the entire scene of his removal in high definition. Sifting through the fresh evidence, Travis felt a cautious surge of hope. He was no longer just one voice crying foul, he had a chorus of supportive testimonies and undeniable visual proof. Deciding not to cower in fear, he made a call to a local attorney recommended by a friend. Travis explained his ordeal in a tight, concise narrative, sharing key pieces of his evidence. The attorney listened intently, occasionally interjecting with questions about official records and any statements the airline might have made. By the end of the call, the attorney sounded genuinely invested in helping him clear his name. As the day wore on, Travis also realized he had a decision to make about the conference. It was only a day away, and VistaFlow could be the turning point for his startup. Though part of him wanted to hide until the danger passed, he resolved to stand his ground. This wasn't just about personal vindication anymore, it was about showing that blatant intimidation and racial profiling couldn't rob him of his future. Summoning his courage, Travis spent the afternoon finalizing the pitch for VistaFlow. He rehearsed with the same passion he'd always had for his project, except now, an undercurrent of urgency pulsed through his every word. He was fighting not just for his business, but also for a principle: everyone had the right to pursue their dreams without fear of unjust persecution. By evening, a plan had crystallized. He would present VistaFlow at the conference, then use the media attention to shine a spotlight on his ordeal. The evidence he'd gathered would go public, exposing the corrupt actions of those officers who had terrorized him from the plane to the parking garage. If the system refused to hold them accountable, then public scrutiny might force the issue. Looking over the city lights twinkling through a crack in the curtains, Travis Dawson took a steadying breath. He was just one man, an entrepreneur with a dream, but he carried with him proof of systemic wrongs that had nearly cost him everything. Clutching his phone, he whispered to himself, "They tried to silence me, but I refused to be silent." The next morning, determined and resolute, he stepped out of his hotel room. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to confront them. His fight for justice and the future of VistaFlow were now intertwined, and he intended to see both battles through to the end. Travis Dawson woke to the shrill buzz of his phone alarm, blinking against the early morning light filtering through the hotel room curtains. He felt a jumble of excitement and dread. Today was the day of the tech conference, the event that could either secure VistaFlow's success or leave his startup in the dust. After the explosive incident in the parking structure and his subsequent deep dive into gathering evidence, he'd hardly slept. Still, he forced himself out of bed, determined not to let the threats and intimidation rob him of this chance. Once he'd showered and donned his crisp blazer, slightly wrinkled despite last night's ironing, Travis double-checked the files on his laptop and the extra copies of his pitch presentation. Even as he tried to calm his nerves, he couldn't escape the memory of the shattered glass exploding behind him in that parking garage. The echo of the blast still lingered in his mind, a stark reminder that some people wanted to silence him for good. He stepped out of the hotel onto a bustling Los Angeles street. The city hummed with its usual morning energy, pedestrians hurrying to work, rideshare cars pulling up to the curb, and a swirl of coffee-scented air drifting from nearby cafes. Travis hailed a cab, grateful for the slight anonymity it offered compared to renting another car. After last night's scare, he wanted to remain as inconspicuous as possible. During the ride, he used his phone to scroll through the responses he'd received from witnesses. A couple had sent lengthy statements describing how they saw him dragged from the plane without cause. Another passenger had forwarded a video capturing Officer Caldwell, one of the cops who arrested Travis, barking orders at him with no explanation. Most chilling of all, one anonymous tipster claimed to have inside information on a small group of officers in the local precinct who were known for misconduct and intimidation tactics. Every piece of data, every testimonial, further fueled Travis's resolve. The cab pulled up to the conference center, an imposing building of glass and steel. Banners and digital signs advertised the event, Innovation Unbound, the next generation of tech-nervous and excited attendees spilled across the sidewalks, conversing in low tones or reviewing their slides one last time. Travis thanked the driver, collected his laptop bag, and joined the throng. Inside the lobby, fluorescent lights gleamed off polished tile floors. Rows of registration tables were staffed by volunteers handing out badges. When Travis gave his name, he couldn't help scanning the area for signs of potential trouble. A lurking officer, a suspicious figure watching from the sidelines. Yet, at least for the moment, everything seemed normal. He received his speaker credentials, a shiny tag that read "Presenter," and pinned it to his blazer. He made his way to the conference hall designated for his presentation. Even though his time slot was in the early afternoon, he wanted to test his equipment and ensure everything was running smoothly. The stage was modest, a podium flanked by 2 large screens. As Travis connected his laptop to the projector, a staff technician offered assistance, guiding him through a quick sound check. The microphones worked perfectly, and the slides appeared crisp on the giant displays. Relief seeped into his tension as he clicked through the final slides of the VistaFlow demo. For a moment, he could almost forget about the fiasco that had landed him in this predicament. VistaFlow was a labor of love, an application designed to streamline data sharing between platforms, revolutionizing how different software ecosystems interacted. Countless nights spent coding, debugging, and brainstorming marketing pitches had culminated in this moment. Yet the respite was short-lived. As he went through the slides a second time, Travis noticed 2 uniformed officers hovering at the back of the hall, scanning the sparse audience and exhibitors milling about. His heart lurched in his chest, and he paused mid-sentence. The tech staffer helping him looked puzzled, following his gaze. Sensing the tension, the staffer asked if everything was all right. Travis forced a tight smile. "Just a bit of stage nerves," he lied. The staffer nodded sympathetically and turned away to manage another glitch with the soundboard. In truth, Travis wasn't sure if these officers were part of a standard security detail or if they were connected to Officer Caldwell's faction. The memory of that explosion replayed in his mind like a bad dream. Instinct told him to remain vigilant. Steeling himself, he finished testing the slideshow. Then he retreated to a quiet corner backstage, flipping through his note cards one last time. It struck him that, under normal circumstances, his biggest worry would be stumbling over a line in front of potential investors. Now, he had to worry about sabotage, false accusations, or worse. He clutched his phone, scanning his notifications again. A handful of new messages had arrived. One witness forwarded additional footage from the plane, capturing Dana Willows whispering urgently to Officer Caldwell right before Travis was pulled out of his seat. It was short but damning, enough to show that the entire incident on the plane had been initiated by a biased report. A flicker of determination flared in his chest. He wasn't just a victim, he was armed with evidence, with a story the world needed to hear. The best way to reclaim his power might be through public exposure. If the conference generated media coverage for VistaFlow, it could also shine a spotlight on the injustice he'd endured. Perhaps that was the path forward, to make people care by linking the app's unveiling to his personal battle. Minutes later, the seating area began to fill up for his presentation. Industry professionals, journalists, and curious onlookers drifted into the room. Travis recognized a couple of prominent bloggers, their cameras poised for photos or live streaming. He silently thanked whichever cosmic force had brought them here. More eyes meant more witnesses, not just to his pitch, but to any potential harassment he might face. When the MC introduced Travis, the crowd offered polite applause. He stepped up to the podium and cleared his throat. The bright lights temporarily blinded him, causing the audience to fade into a sea of silhouettes. With a deep breath, he launched into his talk. The words flowed more smoothly than he expected. Months of preparation had etched every slide into his memory, so his pitch rolled out with the practiced cadence of a seasoned entrepreneur. He showcased VistaFlow's user-friendly interface, its cutting-edge security features, and the integration possibilities that could reshape entire market sectors. Several audience members murmured in appreciation, and Travis could sense a growing buzz in the room. Even from the stage, he caught glimpses of raised eyebrows and nods, a sign that the concept resonated. Yet, amidst the surge of confidence, he remained acutely aware of his surroundings. Halfway through the demo, he noticed one of the uniformed officers from earlier inching closer to the stage's side entrance. It was difficult to see detail in the glare of the stage lights, but something about the officer's posture unnerved him. Travis forced himself to keep talking, projecting outward calm while inside, his nerves rattled like loose bolts. By the time he finished, applause filled the hall. Despite the tension simmering beneath the surface, Travis found himself smiling. The standing ovation from a portion of the audience reaffirmed that his months of hard work weren't in vain. Cameras flashed, and reporters called out questions about VistaFlow's compatibility, scalability, and release plans. He answered as best as he could, mindful that any public statement he made might also find its way back to those who wanted to keep him silent. In the crush of people gathering to ask follow-up questions, Travis felt relatively safe for the moment. Investors handed him business cards, while curious developers and potential collaborators quizzed him on the technical specifications of VistaFlow. The success of his pitch lifted his spirits, even as he stayed watchful for the uniform lurking at the edge of his vision. When the session finally wound down, Travis realized he was drenched in sweat. Whether from the stage lights, the adrenaline, or the fear of potential confrontation, he couldn't be certain. Exiting the stage, he excused himself from a small knot of attendees with a polite smile, wanting a moment to breathe. He ducked into a quiet backstage corridor, bracing himself against a wall. His phone buzzed again, another message from a witness eager to help. As he read the text, footsteps echoed nearby. He glanced up to see that same officer standing in the hallway, face shadowed under the harsh fluorescent light. The officer's stare was intense, full of unspoken threat. Travis's stomach twisted, but he held his ground. He had already been pushed around too much. Clutching his phone, loaded with crucial evidence, he steadied himself and prepared for whatever might come next. If they thought cornering him in a lonely corridor would intimidate him, they were about to discover how determined he truly was. The corridor behind the conference stage was long and poorly lit, with intermittent doors leading to storage areas and dressing rooms. Travis Dawson's pulse pounded in his ears as the officer approached, each step echoing off the concrete walls. He recognized him clearly now, Officer Caldwell, the man who had helped rip him from his seat on the plane. The man he suspected had orchestrated or at least contributed to the sabotage of his rental car. Caldwell's expression was grim, eyes pinned on Travis like a predator sizing up its prey. Keeping his phone discreetly in hand, Travis pressed the record button. Even if the officer forced him to stop, perhaps he could capture enough audio or video evidence to confirm Caldwell's involvement. He needed something, anything, that would connect the dots between the flight incident, the explosion in the parking garage, and the intimidation attempts that continued to shadow him. "What do you want?" Travis demanded, fighting to steady his voice. He stepped back, unwilling to let Caldwell get too close. The hallway felt stifling, his throat dry as he waited for the officer's response. Caldwell responded with a cold sneer. "I think you know," he said softly, but the menace in his tone was unmistakable. "You've been causing quite a stir with your little accusations, Dawson." Travis bristled at the condescension. "If you're referring to my telling the truth, then yes," he shot back. "I have proof of what happened on that plane, and I'm not going to sit by while you and your friends try to bury it." Caldwell took another step closer, and Travis could see the tension in his jaw. "You're making a big mistake," the officer growled, jabbing a finger in Travis's direction. "People like me, we have connections. We can make things very difficult for you, for your business. Think about that before you keep running your mouth." A flicker of fear rippled through Travis, but he shoved it aside. He couldn't afford to show weakness, especially not in front of the man who had already caused him so much trouble. Summoning his courage, he kept the phone angled to record. "I'm not the one who's scared," he said. "You are." Scared of being exposed for the corrupt bully you are. Something like shock flashed across Caldwell's face. For an instant, it seemed he hadn't expected Travis to be so direct. Then his features hardened again. The officer leaned in, voice dropping low. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," he hissed. "Keep pushing, and you'll regret it." Before Travis could respond, the heavy backstage door at the far end of the corridor swung open, and a pair of conference staffers strolled in, chatting animatedly. They stopped short upon seeing Caldwell and Travis locked in a silent confrontation. Caldwell shot Travis a lethal glare before turning on his heel and marching away without another word. Exhaling heavily, Travis realized he'd been holding his breath. Relief washed over him, relief that the staffers had shown up, and also that he'd managed to capture at least part of the encounter on video. He gave the staffers a quick nod and rushed out the side door, not wanting to linger in case Caldwell returned. Despite the tense run-in, Travis managed a weary smile as he rejoined the bustling crowd in the main lobby. The high from his successful presentation still glowed in him, and though the run-in with Caldwell rattled his nerves, it also rekindled his determination. He brushed a hand over his blazer, collecting himself. If the officer's intent was to intimidate him into backing down, it had failed. Spotting a friendly face from earlier. A blogger named Sonia who had shown interest in VistaFlow, Travis decided to leverage the moment. Perhaps if he could spark some media interest in his situation, it would be harder for people like Caldwell to operate in the shadows. "Hey, Sonia," he said, weaving through a cluster of conference-goers. "Got a minute?" Sonia looked up from her phone, eyes bright. "Travis, your demo was fantastic. VistaFlow is generating a ton of buzz already. Seriously, I've seen at least a dozen tweets praising your concept. Great job up there." "Thanks," he replied, lowering his voice. "I need to talk to you about something serious." Her smile vanished, replaced by concern. "Everything okay?" Travis hesitated, scanning the crowd for any sign of Caldwell or his associates. Satisfied they weren't in immediate earshot, he gestured for Sonia to follow him to a quieter alcove near the snack tables. Juggling the swirl of conversation around them, he proceeded to share an abbreviated version of his ordeal, the flight incident, the explosive sabotage, and the harassment he'd just experienced. Sonia's eyes widened with each revelation. She quickly tapped notes into her phone, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "This is huge," she said at last, voice trembling with a mix of shock and journalistic excitement. "Have you gone public with any of this yet?" "Not officially," Travis admitted. "I've been collecting evidence and witness statements, but I'm worried about retaliation." He paused, recalling the venom in Caldwell's voice. "Actually, retaliation has already happened. But I can't stay silent either, I refuse to let them get away with this." Sonia nodded, her expression resolute. "I'd like to help. If we publish your account with the evidence you've gathered, videos, testimonies, everything, it could shed a huge spotlight on the corruption. People need to know that an innocent entrepreneur was targeted, not just by one rogue individual but potentially an entire network of officers." A pulse of gratitude coursed through Travis. This was exactly what he needed, a platform to be heard, a journalist willing to amplify his story. "That's what I'm hoping," he said, voice tinged with relief. "I have video of Caldwell confronting me just minutes ago. And I have footage from the plane, plus statements from other passengers." Sonia's gaze sharpened with determination. "Then let's do this. Send me everything. I'll start drafting an article, and we can coordinate the release once you're ready. But I should warn you, once it's out, there's no turning back. You might attract more trouble." Travis managed a half-smile. "Trouble's already found me, Sonia. At least this way, I can fight back with the truth." They exchanged contact info and arranged to meet later that evening. Sonia promised to keep the story under wraps until Travis gave the green light. She also suggested he reach out to legal aid groups that specialized in police misconduct. He agreed, though he dreaded the potential legal battles looming on the horizon. The rest of the day passed in a fog of adrenaline and hushed conversations. Several potential investors approached Travis with genuine interest in VistaFlow. He jotted down phone numbers, answered questions about the platform's long-term viability, and feigned normalcy despite the storm raging in his mind. More than once, he caught glimpses of uniformed security moving through the conference crowds, prompting him to wonder if Caldwell had dispatched colleagues to keep tabs on him. By the time the afternoon sessions concluded, Travis felt utterly drained. Yet he also sensed a growing undercurrent of hope. For the first time since stepping off that airplane in Los Angeles, he had a concrete plan. Gathering his laptop and business cards, he headed out of the center with purposeful strides. The sun was setting over the city, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink as he slipped into a rideshare car, phone clutched tightly in his hand. He replayed the day's confrontations in his head, the success of his presentation, the menacing stare of Caldwell, the spark of promise in Sonia's eyes. Even though the threats had escalated, so had his resolve. These were the moments when illusions of safety shattered, revealing who he truly was, a man who refused to back down, even in the face of injustice. On the ride back to his hotel, he started drafting an email to the witnesses who had been in touch, requesting any further evidence they could spare. His phone buzzed with a new message, Sonia, confirming their meeting time. He typed a quick reply, promising to send her the video clip soon. Leaning back in the seat, Travis gazed out the window at the city lights whizzing by. He knew that exposing the corrupt officers would be risky and time-consuming. But the alternative, remaining silent while they trampled his rights and possibly harmed others, felt unbearable. For now, he let the gentle hum of the engine and the blur of traffic soothe him, if only for a moment. The true battle, he realized, was just beginning. Later that night, Travis Dawson sat in a tiny cafe a few blocks from his hotel. The overhead lights lent the space an amber glow, casting soft shadows on the walls. A handful of late-night patrons sipped coffee or typed away on laptops, oblivious to the tension coiled in Travis's posture. Across from him sat Sonia, the blogger who had agreed to break his story to the public. Between them, a tablet displayed a folder filled with video clips, images, and documents detailing Travis's harrowing experiences, everything from the flight removal to the explosion in the parking structure. Sonia skimmed through the evidence, her expression growing more somber with each new piece she reviewed. Occasionally, she glanced up and met Travis's gaze, as though seeking confirmation that this was all real. He nodded each time, the gravity of their task weighing heavily on them both. "This is beyond outrageous," she said at last, leaning back in her chair. "I was prepared for some kind of abuse of power, but this is next level. I'm talking multiple officers conspiring, deliberately targeting you with no valid reason." Travis exhaled slowly. He'd grown so accustomed to the anxiety that sharing his story now felt oddly cathartic. "I know," he murmured. "But as soon as we publish, it's going to get a lot more intense. Caldwell and the others aren't going to sit quietly while we expose them." Sonia nodded, understanding written across her features. "I've prepared for situations like this before, though rarely has the evidence been this substantial. The biggest concern is your safety. If they were willing to rig an explosion in your car, who knows what else they'll do." A pang of unease clutched at Travis's chest, but he steadied himself. "I've reached out to a lawyer who specializes in police misconduct. A friend recommended him. We're meeting tomorrow morning to discuss potential legal avenues. With any luck, we'll file an official complaint backed by all of this." He tapped the screen lightly, indicating the files that painted such a damning picture. Sonia gave an encouraging nod. "Good. If you can get the legal process rolling at the same time we break the story, we stand a better chance of forcing accountability. The media attention might protect you, at least to some extent." Outside the cafe window, the sky was an inky blue, punctuated by the glow of streetlights and passing headlights. Travis glanced at the clock. It was nearing midnight, and exhaustion pulled at him like a heavy tide. Despite the fatigue, a sense of urgency spurred him on. "Let's finalize what you need," he said. "Then I'll head back to the hotel and compile a clear timeline for you." They spent the next hour planning the article's structure. Sonia wanted to open with a compelling hook, describing Travis's dramatic removal from the plane, then weave in the details of his entrepreneurial background to show exactly how far-reaching the consequences had been. She'd tie in the evidence incrementally, building toward the explosive sabotage and culminating in the tense confrontation at the conference. It would be a narrative that was both personal and disturbingly systemic, revealing how prejudice and corruption could intersect to endanger innocent people. When they finally parted ways, Travis stepped out into the cool night air feeling both drained and invigorated. He walked the short distance back to his hotel, every dark corner and passing stranger catching his wary eye. The city, so full of potential and opportunity by day, felt tinged with threat after all he'd endured. Back in his room, he locked the door, checked the windows, and jammed a chair beneath the handle. Only then did he allow himself to sit at the cramped desk and open his laptop. He drafted a chronological list of events, carefully attaching the corresponding evidence for Sonia's reference. Each bullet point reminded him of the emotional whiplash he'd experienced: excitement for Vista Flow, horror at the plane incident, the fear after the explosion, the righteous anger that drove him to gather evidence. A sudden ping sounded from his phone, an unknown number. He hesitated, then opened the message. His blood ran cold as he read the text: "Stop what you're doing, or you'll end up regretting it. This is your final warning." There was no name, no signature, just a menacing statement. The subtle but unmistakable threat hammered home how dire the situation was. He copied the message and pasted it into a separate file, labeling it, "Threat, Unknown Number." Resisting the urge to smash his phone in frustration, he simply turned off the device. If they wanted him scared, they'd succeeded, but that didn't mean he would back down. Still, sleep seemed impossible as he recalled the ominous tone in Caldwell's voice, the destructive force of that explosion, and the hostility at every turn. For a few hours, he dozed fitfully, dreams plagued by images of shattered windows and menacing uniforms. By dawn, he'd managed only fragments of rest. Shaking off the lingering nightmares, he rose to shower and dress for his meeting with the lawyer. The walk to the attorney's office was mercifully short, and he arrived early, wanting to ensure no chance of missing the appointment. The law office was housed in an old brick building with ivy creeping up one side. The receptionist greeted him politely, asking him to wait a moment. Soon, a tall, composed attorney with salt and pepper hair emerged from a side hallway, hand extended in greeting. "Mr. Dawson, I'm Aaron Reeves," the man introduced himself. "Come on back, let's talk." Travis followed him into a small conference room. The walls were lined with certificates, law books, and framed photographs of important cases Aaron had been part of. Once settled at the table, Travis laid out the short version of his story. He showed Aaron the video clips, the photos, the text messages. The attorney listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. "This is quite substantial," Aaron said, leaning forward. "Most clients who come to me with claims of police misconduct don't have half this level of documentation. Have you gone public with any of this yet?" "Not yet," Travis admitted. "But I'm working with a blogger named Sonia. She's planning to publish a comprehensive article soon." Aaron nodded. "Understood. Legal action and media coverage can either complement each other or complicate each other. We'll have to tread carefully, ensuring we don't jeopardize any potential cases in court." "That's why I'm here," Travis said. "I need to do this right. We're dealing with a group of officers who aren't afraid to threaten me or even orchestrate violence." Aaron drummed his fingers on a legal pad. "In that case, we need to secure a protective order, possibly. Your safety is paramount. Beyond that, if you're serious about filing formal complaints, we can start with the local police oversight board and escalate as needed. If we find evidence of a wider ring of corruption, we could involve federal authorities." Travis swallowed. The idea of confronting the police department head-on was daunting, but he saw no alternative. "I've come this far," he said quietly, "and I'm not backing down." Aaron offered a supportive smile. "You're doing the right thing. Let's get it all organized. We'll submit a formal complaint, along with your evidence, to the Internal Affairs Division. I'll also reach out to some contacts who've handled cases like this before, to make sure we cover all angles." They spent the better part of an hour assembling a strategy. By the time Travis emerged from the law office, the morning sun was high, and his phone showed several missed calls and texts from Sonia, urging him to send the final timeline. He felt like a man on a tightrope, balancing precariously between fear and resolve. One misstep, and he might plunge into a world of greater danger. But if he succeeded, he could expose corruption that affected not just him, but any other unsuspecting individual who might cross paths with the same officers. Stomach growling from skipped meals and frayed nerves, Travis decided to grab a quick bite at a nearby deli. Over a hastily consumed sandwich, he typed a response to Sonia, confirming that he'd have everything sent by mid-afternoon. Each keystroke felt like an affirmation, a silent declaration that he refused to let intimidation win. Yes, the road ahead looked perilous. The threats were real, and the forces behind them were powerful. But in this moment, seated alone in a bustling deli, Travis felt a surge of clarity. He had Vista Flow, the dream he'd nurtured for so long, and he had the truth. Together, they were weapons strong enough to stand against the most daunting opposition. Late afternoon sunshine stretched across the Los Angeles skyline as Travis Dawson exited the deli where he'd hastily eaten a sandwich. He stepped onto the bustling sidewalk, phone in hand, scanning for the nearest rideshare pickup. His conversation with attorney Aaron Reeves had given him a sliver of optimism, enough to believe that a legal strategy might protect him from the corrupt officers who had upended his life. Still, a tight coil of anxiety lingered under his ribs. He tapped on the rideshare app, arranging a ride back to his hotel. A few minutes later, a compact sedan pulled up to the curb. The driver, a friendly older woman with a warm smile, welcomed him inside. As the car navigated the jam-packed streets, Travis stared out the window, replaying everything that had happened since he first boarded that ill-fated flight from Houston to Los Angeles. His mind drifted to Dana Willows, the flight attendant whose suspicion had ignited the entire ordeal. He wondered if she had regrets, or if she still believed that her biased assumptions were justified. After all, her accusations had led directly to Officer Caldwell and his cohort dragging Travis off the plane. The memory of that humiliating moment still made his stomach clench. The driver dropped him off at the hotel, a modest building that, for the time being, was the only place he felt remotely safe. As soon as Travis entered the lobby, his phone buzzed. He expected another message from Sonia, but the name on the screen made him freeze, an unknown number again. His heartbeat quickened, recalling the threatening text he'd received the previous night. Summoning his courage, he stepped aside from the flow of arriving guests and opened the message. "We're watching you." That was all it said. A prickly chill ran down his spine. He lifted his gaze, scanning the lobby for anyone who might be observing him. Bellhops pushed luggage carts, a few business travelers scrolled on their phones, and a family wrangled children by the reception desk. Nobody appeared overtly suspicious. Still, the text felt like a razor at his throat. He slipped his phone back into his pocket and hurried to the elevator, jabbing the button for his floor. Once inside his room, he secured the deadbolt, placed the chain latch, and wedged a chair under the handle. It was the same makeshift fortress he'd arranged every night since the explosion. The next step was to forward the threat message to Attorney Reeves. Maybe it could be used as further evidence of harassment. Exhausted but wired, Travis set his laptop on the small desk. True to his promise, he compiled a detailed timeline for Sonia. Each entry documented a key event, from the moment he boarded the plane in Houston, to the intimidation in the airplane aisle, to the violent removal, to the sabotage of his rental car. He attached videos, screenshots, and written statements from witnesses. The sheer volume of material was staggering, and seeing it all laid out made him recoil at the scale of the injustice. While he worked, the alarm on his phone chimed softly. He had an online meeting scheduled with Sonia in 20 minutes. They'd decided to talk face-to-face via video chat to coordinate the release of her upcoming article. As the minutes ticked by, he noticed his palms growing sweaty. Going public would increase his visibility, potentially drawing more danger. But it also felt like the only way to challenge the forces stacked against him. At the appointed time, Travis opened his video chat app. Sonia's face appeared on screen, framed by her curly hair, her expression serious. She greeted him warmly but cut right to the heart of the matter. "How are you holding up?" "Been better," Travis admitted, recalling the latest text. He filled her in on the new threat, the attorney's advice, and his own roller coaster emotions. Sonia's face hardened with concern. "That's awful," she said, shaking her head. "You're doing the right thing by documenting all of this. The more evidence, the more pressure we can apply." He offered a wan smile. "I'm sending you an updated folder of everything. Once you have it, you'll be able to finalize your article, right?" "That's the plan," she confirmed. "After we publish, I'll push it to major social media platforms. I'm betting people will rally behind you, especially once they see the footage. It's going to spark outrage, and hopefully, real change." Despite his fear, a flicker of hope ignited in Travis's chest. "I sure hope so. Because these texts aren't stopping, and I don't think Caldwell or his allies will just back off." "I understand," Sonia said gently. "We can't guarantee your safety, but we can help you shine a spotlight on their actions. They'll find it harder to operate in the shadows once the public's watching." They spent another half-hour refining timelines and deciding how to frame the story to maximize impact. Sonia advised weaving personal details about Travis, his upbringing, his passion for technology, his father's long-standing advice about maintaining composure, into the piece, to humanize him in the eyes of readers. While it felt awkward to share private anecdotes, Travis saw the logic. The public needed to see him as more than just a name in a sensational headline. When they wrapped up, Travis ended the call and lingered for a moment, staring at the blank wall in front of him. Tomorrow, they would release everything. The gravity of it took his breath away. Once the genie's out of the bottle, there's no putting it back, he thought. But he had no alternative. Lives and reputations were being crushed, not just his own but potentially anyone else who dared step out of line with these corrupt officers. His hunger reminded him he hadn't eaten much since lunch. Venturing outside again felt daunting, but he decided the risk was necessary. He couldn't hole up in his hotel room indefinitely. After all, part of facing down intimidation meant refusing to let it dictate every facet of his life. He slipped on a baseball cap and sunglasses, an admittedly flimsy disguise, but it eased his nerves slightly. Descending to the lobby, he scanned every face in the lounge before stepping onto the street. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in streaks of gold and pink. He spotted a small sandwich shop a block away and made a beeline for it, head down, shoulders tense. The shop was nearly empty, apart from a bored teenager behind the counter. Travis ordered a turkey sandwich and iced tea, then settled at a corner table. As he unwrapped his meal, he allowed himself a moment of normalcy, just a man grabbing dinner. But his mind remained vigilant, eyes flickering to the glass door every time a new customer walked in. Halfway through the sandwich, his phone rang, startling him. Another unknown number. He answered cautiously, expecting a hostile voice. Instead, a hesitant woman's voice came through the line. "Hello. Mr. Dawson?" "Yes," he said, brow furrowing. "This is, well, I'm not sure if I should give my name," she began, voice trembling. "I was on your flight from Houston. I saw everything, the way that flight attendant treated you, how those officers humiliated you. I've been watching social media, and I found your contact details through a passenger forum." Travis sat upright, instantly focused. "I appreciate you reaching out. Do you have any footage?" "Yes, though it's not very long." But I do have a clear shot of the moment the officers first confronted you. And I overheard the attendant, that woman with the blonde hair, Dana, I think, she was telling them you looked dangerous. I remember because the wording seemed so off. His pulse quickened. That could be critical. I'd love to see it, if you're comfortable sharing. She hesitated. I am, but I'm scared. My husband says we shouldn't get involved. But I can't just ignore what happened to you. Travis's heart twisted with gratitude. I completely understand. I'm working with a reputable attorney and a journalist who's about to publish an article on this. Any piece of evidence you have could help. And your identity will be protected if that's what you need. Let me think about it, she whispered. I'll text you the clip, and you can decide if it's useful. But please, don't reveal who I am unless it's absolutely necessary. You have my word, Travis promised, his voice steady. Thank you. They hung up. For several moments, Travis remained at his table, adrenaline surging. With each new witness or piece of footage, his case grew stronger. But so did the sense of jeopardy. There was no telling how Caldwell would react once the story broke. Finishing his sandwich suddenly felt like a chore. He thanked the teenager at the counter and left a tip before heading back into the evening air. Darkness was settling over the city, and streetlights flickered on, illuminating pockets of sidewalk. Clutching his phone and scanning the pedestrians around him, Travis hurried toward the hotel, mentally preparing for the critical day that lay ahead. Tomorrow, the world would learn the truth about what had been done to him, and hopefully, it would mark the first step toward dismantling the corruption that threatened far more than just his startup dreams. Morning arrived with a hushed anticipation that vibrated through every nerve in Travis Dawson's body. The night before had been restless. He replayed the latest threat messages, the clandestine phone calls, and the conversation with the anonymous passenger, all swirling in his mind until sleep felt impossible. By the time dawn edged over the horizon, he was already awake, heart pounding in a cocktail of dread and determination. He propped himself up in bed, laptop balanced on his knees, reading over the final draft of Sonia's article. Her headline was stark and arresting: Entrepreneur accuses officers of violent misconduct, the untold story of a flight gone wrong. Underneath that, she had embedded several short video clips, including those from the anonymous witnesses. A brief overview of Travis's background introduced him as a driven tech innovator who had boarded a plane to pitch his groundbreaking app, VistaFlow. The piece then escalated into the chilling account of how a flight attendant's biased suspicions led to a cascade of terrifying events. Sonia had woven in quotes from the official police statement Travis had received, one riddled with contradictions, and contrasted them with eyewitness testimonies. Photographs highlighted the shattered rental car window and the bruises on Travis's arms where the officers had forcibly restrained him. In every paragraph, a sense of injustice bled through, yet Sonia's tone remained factual and measured, avoiding sensationalism. It was precisely the balanced approach Travis had hoped for. At 8 a.m. sharp, Sonia sent him a short text, "Ready?" "Once I hit publish, there's no going back." Heart hammering, he replied with a single word, "Yes." He forced himself through a lukewarm shower, the water pressure never quite strong enough to wash away the anxiety. Dressing in a simple outfit, jeans and a short-sleeved button-down, he wrestled with whether to remain at the hotel or venture out. Ultimately, he decided to stay put for a few hours. If Caldwell and his cohorts were planning to retaliate, they'd likely be monitoring his usual routes. Once dressed, he checked Sonia's website. Her article had already garnered hundreds of comments in the span of minutes. Social media was lighting up with shares, retweets, and heated conversations. Some voices called for immediate investigations. Others expressed doubt, accusing Travis of fabricating the story for attention. But as more witnesses chimed in with corroborating accounts, the momentum shifted decisively in Travis's favor. He glanced out the window. An unmarked sedan idled on the opposite side of the street, its occupant obscured by tinted windows. Every fiber in Travis's being suspected it was law enforcement or someone connected to them. The occupant remained still, showing no sign of leaving. Travis closed the curtains and tried to calm his breathing. A knock on his door startled him. Instantly alert, he peeked through the peephole, relief washing over him when he recognized attorney Aaron Reeves. Travis removed the chair from under the handle and unlatched the security chain, letting Aaron step inside. "Quite a morning," Aaron observed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "The article is making waves. I've received calls from a few media outlets requesting interviews with you." Travis nodded, anxiety and excitement mingling. "I figured it might happen. How should I respond?" Carefully, Aaron said. "I suggest we do a single, well-managed interview to reinforce your credibility. Maybe a press conference in a controlled environment, so we can present the evidence systematically. I can stand by your side. My office is also drafting an official complaint to the local police oversight committee. We'll file it today." Travis exhaled. "Good. The more official the process, the harder it'll be for them to brush it all under the rug." Aaron set his briefcase on a small table, withdrawing a slim folder. "I also have news. An anonymous donor has offered to pay for additional security measures for you, if you're willing. Bodyguards or a secure accommodation." Travis blinked in surprise. "You're kidding. Who would do that?" Aaron shrugged. "They requested anonymity, but said they believe your case is important. Could be an activist group, a civil rights organization, or even a philanthropic tech titan. What matters is you have an opportunity to protect yourself." The offer both reassured and rattled Travis. He never imagined his personal battle would reach people with such resources. "I appreciate it," he said quietly. "Let's explore the security detail. After the explosion, the threats, everything, I need to be safe." "Agreed," Aaron said, flipping open his folder. "Now, about the press conference. I can arrange for a small venue, maybe a room in my office building. We could invite local reporters and give them direct access to you. That might put pressure on the police department to respond publicly." Before Travis could reply, his phone chimed. A text from Sonia: "This is going bigger than I anticipated, call me ASAP." He turned to Aaron. "Mind if I take this?" Aaron shook his head, stepping aside to review some documents. Travis answered the call. Sonia's voice crackled with a heady mix of excitement and concern. "Travis, the story's trending top 3 in multiple cities. I'm getting requests from national news channels wanting interviews. They want you on camera. The local precinct is already under scrutiny." One of the officers, not Caldwell, but a colleague of his, gave a brief statement denying everything. His pulse quickened. "So they're trying to get ahead of this, spinning a false narrative." "Exactly. They're claiming you were aggressive on the flight, refused to comply, all the usual nonsense. But I have more footage from a passenger who just emailed me, footage that directly contradicts their version. I can send it to you right now." Travis rubbed the bridge of his nose. Each new piece of evidence was a double-edged sword, powerful for his case, but also likely to provoke a more extreme backlash from the corrupt faction. "Send it," he said. "I'll talk to Aaron about how to deploy it effectively. And Sonia, thank you. This is huge. You're making a real difference." She paused, her tone softening. "Just be careful, okay? I've dealt with backlash from the subjects of my exposés before, but this one feels more volatile." "I will," Travis assured her. "We're actually discussing security right now." After hanging up, Travis relayed the conversation to Aaron. The lawyer's brow furrowed. "This is escalating quickly. On one hand, it's good, public pressure is mounting. But it also means Caldwell and his associates might lash out in desperation. We should proceed with the press conference sooner rather than later, before they have time to spin the narrative further." They spent the next hour hashing out details. Aaron planned to contact a few sympathetic local politicians who had spoken out against police misconduct in the past, hoping they might attend the press conference or at least voice support. He would also arrange private security for the event, ensuring that no uninvited intruders disrupted the proceedings. As the morning inched toward noon, Travis realized he hadn't eaten. The tension suppressed his appetite, but he forced himself to have a quick snack from a protein bar stashed in his suitcase. He needed his strength. This was a marathon, not a sprint. Shortly after, Aaron's phone vibrated. He glanced down, reading the caller ID. Internal Affairs, he murmured, stepping away to answer. Travis waited, straining to catch snippets of the conversation. Aaron's side was mostly acknowledgments. Yes, I have the file, that can be arranged, of course, I understand, and so on. When Aaron returned, he looked both satisfied and wary. Internal Affairs wants to meet with you. They're receiving a flood of complaints from citizens who read Sonia's article and are demanding an investigation. They also want copies of any relevant video we have. Travis's stomach flipped. That's good, right? They're taking it seriously? Aaron nodded. Yes, but be cautious. Some of these investigators may be sincere, others might be trying to protect their own. You'll need an attorney present when you give any statement. Absolutely. Aaron gathered his files, double-checking he hadn't left anything behind. I'll schedule the meeting for tomorrow morning. We'll finalize the press conference details for the afternoon. In the meantime, stay put. I'll have a security detail here by nightfall. Travis walked him to the door, heart pounding in a mix of relief and apprehension. They had stirred the hornet's nest, and now everything was in motion. The fight he'd stumbled into, once confined to a humiliating scene on an airplane, had snowballed into a potential watershed moment for police accountability in the city. After Aaron left, Travis locked the door behind him, resecured the chair, and checked his phone. New messages flooded his inbox, supportive notes from friends, anxious inquiries from family, interview requests from more reporters. Even strangers, people who had read about his story, wrote to share their own experiences with misconduct. He spent the afternoon wading through this sea of communication, drafting polite but firm responses where needed. The emotional toll was steep, each new account of injustice felt like a weight added to his shoulders. Yet it also reaffirmed why he had to see this through. It wasn't just about clearing his own name anymore. It was about exposing a pattern that could victimize anyone. By evening, a security company representative arrived, introducing himself as Mark. A tall, muscular man in a crisp blazer, Mark had a no-nonsense demeanor that put Travis somewhat at ease. They discussed protocols, including Mark's plan to stay on the same floor and monitor the hall at night, and to accompany Travis if he needed to leave the hotel. As dusk deepened into night, Travis took a moment to reflect on the roller coaster day. The article was out, the story was spreading. Internal Affairs had opened the door, and the press conference loomed. Yes, Caldwell was still out there, undoubtedly furious, possibly plotting, but Travis wasn't alone anymore. He had an attorney, a supportive journalist, an ever-growing circle of witnesses, and now physical protection. For all the terror that still haunted him, a seed of confidence took root. Finally, he allowed himself to close his laptop and crawl under the covers. His body felt leaden, and his mind crackled with static. Outside, city lights sparkled. For the first time in a while, he thought about VistaFlow, the app at the heart of this entire trip. He promised himself he wouldn't let the dream die, not after coming this far. With that resolution in mind, he gradually drifted into a restless sleep, uncertain yet hopeful about what tomorrow would bring. The next morning brought a fresh wave of activity. Travis Dawson woke before dawn, adrenaline coursing through his veins. Mark, the security guard, was already stationed in the hallway, nodding a brief greeting as Travis stepped out to grab a quick breakfast downstairs. Every sense seemed heightened, each passing glance from a stranger felt loaded with potential threat. Travis chose a corner table in the hotel's small cafe, ordering eggs and toast he barely tasted. Across the room, Mark lingered discreetly, scanning every new arrival. Despite the tension, Travis felt something akin to relief. For the first time since this nightmare began, he wasn't entirely alone in looking out for his safety. At 9 o'clock sharp, he and Mark headed to Aaron Reeves's law office. The press conference was scheduled for noon, but first, Travis would meet with internal affairs. The elevator ride to the 14th floor felt interminable. When the doors opened, Travis stepped into a quiet corridor lined with frosted glass doors. Aaron greeted him outside a small conference room, wearing a sober gray suit and a reassuring smile. "They're ready for us," Aaron said, opening the door. Inside waited two investigators, a man and a woman, both dressed in plain suits. They introduced themselves as Detective Burrows and Detective Harlow. Their expressions were serious but professional as they exchanged handshakes with Travis and Aaron. The interrogation. Though Aaron insisted on calling it an informal discussion, lasted almost an hour. Travis recounted everything, starting with Dana Willows's suspicious attitude on the plane, then describing how Officer Caldwell and another officer had forcibly removed him. He explained the explosion in the parking structure, the string of threatening texts, and the subsequent evidence he'd gathered. Throughout, he occasionally glanced at Aaron, who nodded in silent approval, ensuring Travis was clear and concise. By the end of it, Burrows and Harlow looked troubled. They promised to request official statements from the airline, the local precinct, and especially from Caldwell's unit. While neither investigator revealed much of their own suspicions, Travis left the meeting with the impression that they took him seriously. Aaron whispered as they exited, "They're either very good at feigning interest, or they really care about justice. Let's hope for the latter." Outside, the sun blazed bright in a cloudless sky. Mark escorted Travis and Aaron down to a waiting car, a private sedan the security company had arranged. They drove a few blocks to a small conference center, where a row of journalists had already begun to gather at the entrance, cameras and notepads in hand. Nerves twisted in Travis's stomach. Standing before cameras, revealing his face and story to the country, felt daunting. Yet, he reminded himself, the public exposure was precisely what gave him protection. He wasn't just some anonymous victim anymore, he was a voice challenging corrupt power. Inside, a modest stage and podium had been set up in a multipurpose room. A scattering of chairs faced the front. Sonia stood near the podium, conferring with an audio technician. She caught sight of Travis and waved, her grin tinged with apprehension. "Everything set," she said. "We go live in about 15 minutes. Travis nodded, stepping aside to gather his thoughts. He glanced at Aaron, who gave him an encouraging thumbs up. Despite the dryness in his throat, Travis reminded himself that he was prepared for this. He had the truth, and, crucially, tangible evidence, to back him up. When the moment arrived, Aaron introduced himself first, briefly summarizing Travis's claims and the legal steps being taken. Then, with cameras rolling, Travis took the podium. Bright lights glared, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. He started by stating who he was, a tech entrepreneur whose dreams had led him to Los Angeles, only to be undermined by racial bias and police misconduct. He described the harrowing events on the plane and their aftermath, referencing Sonia's article and the corroborating videos. Occasional gasps rippled through the audience as he detailed the parking garage explosion and the menacing texts he had received. But Travis didn't stop there. He talked about the broader implications, how easily an innocent person could be labeled a threat, how certain individuals in authority abused their power to oppress rather than protect. In a steady voice, he called for an impartial investigation, not just of Officer Caldwell but of the entire precinct culture that allowed such behavior to flourish. Questions erupted from the reporters. Travis fielded them as best he could, with Aaron stepping in whenever legal nuances arose. Sonia filmed everything, her phone perched on a small tripod. In the back, Mark kept watch, scanning for any sign of trouble. Halfway through the press conference, the doors swung open and a cluster of uniformed officers appeared. Tension electrified the room. The reporters fell silent, cameras swiveling to capture the arrival. At their forefront stood a stern-faced woman in a captain's uniform, accompanied by a handful of subordinates. Travis's breath hitched. Was Caldwell among them? But Caldwell wasn't there. The woman introduced herself as Captain Navarro of the department's Public Relations Division. She stated that the department would be conducting a full review of the allegations, ensuring fairness and transparency. Her formal statement felt rehearsed, yet she concluded with a surprising note: "We do not tolerate misconduct in our ranks. If these claims are validated, disciplinary actions will be taken." The tension in the room ebbed slightly, replaced by a swirl of chatter and more questions. Then, unexpectedly, one reporter asked if Captain Navarro had personally questioned Officer Caldwell about the events. She hesitated before replying, "We have attempted to reach him for questioning. He is, currently on leave." A murmur spread among the journalists. On leave, voluntary or otherwise? Travis exchanged a look with Sonia, who mouthed the word, "fleeing." He shrugged, uncertain. If Caldwell had gone into hiding, that might speak volumes about his guilt. Or it could be a tactic to avoid official interrogation. Captain Navarro offered no further details, and the officers left as suddenly as they'd arrived. The press conference continued for a few minutes more, but the atmosphere had shifted. Once it wrapped up, Travis fielded a final cluster of questions before stepping down from the podium. Aaron and Sonia flanked him, guiding him toward a rear exit where Mark was waiting. They emerged into a corridor, adrenaline crashing through Travis's system. Relief mingled with unease. He'd told his story publicly, there was no turning back now. Whether Caldwell was on leave, in hiding, or planning another ambush remained unknown. But Travis's voice was out in the open, echoed by supporters and validated by evidence. With internal affairs conducting interviews and the media spotlight glaring on the precinct, the pressure on Caldwell and his cohorts had never been higher. As Travis walked out into the bright afternoon, he felt an unsteady mixture of triumph and vulnerability. This was the biggest step yet in his quest for justice, and it might be the most dangerous one. Life often tests our resolve by placing us in challenging circumstances we never saw coming, like Travis Dawson, who found himself thrust into a whirlwind of suspicion and danger on what should have been a simple business trip. His experiences reveal how prejudice and misguided assumptions can shatter one's sense of security, forcing us to stand up for ourselves when everything feels stacked against us. Yet through adversity, Travis discovered his greatest strength, a refusal to remain silent in the face of injustice. His story reminds us that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the determination to confront it head-on. For those of us well into adulthood or enjoying our senior years, it's a powerful lesson that we are never too old or too established to encounter new hurdles, or to rise above them. It's about staying true to our principles, even when standing our ground feels risky. It shows that careful planning, unwavering determination, and seeking out allies can yield a fighting chance, whether the battle is against prejudice, corruption, or any injustice that threatens to derail our dreams. Most importantly, it highlights that our voices matter. By sharing the truth, we can shine a light on wrongdoing and potentially protect others from similar fates. If you believe in the power of personal resilience, please support this message. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. And in the comments, let us know your thoughts on how you've overcome unexpected obstacles in your own life. Together, we can keep these conversations going, remind one another that perseverance is possible at any age, and encourage a more just and understanding world.